Hello, we're back at it again. Today's lesson is going to be focusing on elements of a story. Now, this is going to be parts of a fictional story, a story that is generally made up or not based in fact. So, there are going to generally be five major or important elements of a story. Count them five. First of all, we have character or characters. Generally, there's more than one character in a story. However, sometimes there may only be one. Also, for number two, we have setting, when and where the story takes place. Next, we have conflict. Now, these are problems that arise throughout the story. Conflict helps to make a story interesting. Next, we have plot. This is the structure of the story. And lastly, we have theme, and this is going to be the overall meaning or message from a story. So we will take this one step at a time. First, we're starting with character. And as you can see down here, I have the definition for character. Character. A character is a person or sometimes even an animal who takes part in the action of a short story or other literary work. Writers use different methods of characterization to help build on their characters and to help you understand what their characters that they have created are like. For instance, a writer might include details about a character's appearance, speech, actions. The writer might also tell you directly about the character's personality. And by paying attention to these details, you can get a complete picture of a character's traits or qualities, such as friendliness, shyness, or jealousy. Some examples of characters that I have included in here is Maggie from A Walking Dead. We have Bart Simpson from The Simpsons. We have Mickey Mouse from the infamous Disney Mickey Mouse movies. And then we have one of the many doctors. These are all different characters, and each one of their characters is unique in that there are no other characters that are like these characters. So, one of the two methods of characterization, which when I say characterization, I mean characterization is when the author includes details about a character to give you a better sense of who they are and what their motivation is. Sometimes a writer will tell you directly or explicitly what a character is like. And as a reader with direct characterization, you don't have to do any detective work to figure out the character's unique personality traits. You don't have to infer anything because these things are directly stated to you, such as Cartman's active imagination often got him into trouble. You are being told that he has an active imagination, and you can assume that because he gets into trouble that he is a troublemaker. Next, we have Grandpa Herbert has always been a kind person. When we were kids, he took the time to teach us baseball. We are being told directly that Grandpa Herbert is a kind person. We don't need to infer or assume anything because we are told it directly. The second method of characterization is going to be indirect characterization, and this is when the author implies or hints at what a character is like through their, and you can use the acronym STEAL to help you remember this, through their speech, thoughts, effects on others, actions, and looks. First, for speech. The way that our character talks or the things that he or she says can give us additional insight into who they are as a person. Maybe they stutter. Do they suffer from social anxiety? Are they nervous? Are they encouraging of others when they talk? That could mean that they are more of a leader. Next, we have thoughts. This is going to give us a direct look into the mind of our character. What is revealed through those characters' private thoughts and feelings. It helps us give us a much better sense of who or she is and what his or her motivation may be. Next, we can look at our character's effect on other characters. Does our character make others nervous? Maybe he or she is a bully. Do others speak well of our character? He or she could be a kind and hardworking person. Next, we have actions. By looking at our actions, we can ask ourselves, well, what does the character do? And how does our character behave? Are they cowardly? Are they brave? And then lastly, we have looks, and looks matter too. Now, we've all heard the saying of we don't want to judge a book by its cover, but looks still give us a little hint, not the whole picture, but a little hint as to what our character is like. Someone who wears expensive clothes may have more money, or maybe they just kind of want to try really, maybe they're just trying really hard to fit in. Or someone who smiles more often is generally going to be happier than one who does not. So we can take all of this, the speech, the thoughts, our character's effect on others, their actions, their looks, and we can all use those as different puzzle pieces to understand what our character's like as a whole. Another very important element of a story is setting. The setting of the story tells the time when and the place where the story takes place. It generally provides background information for characters, events, and the plot. I have some examples down here. So, a story that takes place during a time of war or rebellion, the mood is going to have a lot of anxiety. There are going to be a lot of people that might be nervous, or a lot of aggression, perhaps, and a lot of fighting. While a story that takes place during prosperity, everyone is going to be in a much better mood. People are very content with their lives because they are doing well for themselves and everything is going right. A story that takes place over a short period of time and in a more limited location, such as a house, will be very intense and will focus more on the characters themselves and those characters' feelings rather than things going on around them. The next important element of a story is conflict. Generally, there is not going to be a story without conflict. You need some sort of conflict in order to write a story. Otherwise, it's going to be really boring and nobody's going to want to read it. No offense. The conflict is a struggle between two forces, whether it's people or things in a short story. The main character is usually involved in the central conflict. And that's how you almost get your readers involved, because you're supposed to develop an attachment to that character, and once that character is involved in a conflict, you, the reader, becomes involved in the conflict as well. On the other side, there may also be other conflicts going on, and the main character may also struggle against another character, against nature or natural forces, against society, or possibly even against themselves through making a decision or an illness. So I have examples of 4 types of conflict over here. First, we have man versus man. Now, this is going to be one person versus one other person, whether it's a physical fight, an argument, or just two people not being able to agree about something. Next, we have man versus nature. This is going to be any type of natural occurrence, whether it's a tornado, whether it's a hurricane, a flood, or even maybe it's just the cold Arctic weather. Next, we have man versus himself. This is where the character struggles to either make a decision, while they're struggling with emotions, or maybe they're struggling with a mental or physical illness that they're trying to overcome. Lastly, there is man versus society. In this case, man is going to be battling society. Maybe it's something that that person does not agree with the way that the society is run. Or maybe they're just seeking their own individual path outside of that society. The next element of a story is plot. Now, a plot is a series of events and characters' actions that relate to the central conflict. And you can see an example of a plot right here. So generally, you may have seen a plot diagram before, which looks very similar to a mountain. Can't really see that. Let's try that again, which looks very similar to like a mountain. So that's what we're looking at right down here. We have our exposition to start us off, climbing on up. Then we have our rising action. The very tippy top, we're going to have our climax. Then the climax to the falling action. And last but not least, we have our resolution. And I'll go over the differences between these on the next page. So plot, what exactly are the 5 stages of plot? You may be asking, or not, but I'm going to tell you anyways, so it doesn't really matter. First, there is the exposition. The exposition is the first stage in a plot where necessary background information is given or provided. That's going to be at the very beginning. We get information about our characters, we get information about our setting, and sometimes our conflict is introduced in the exposition, but generally our conflict is what starts the rising action. Speaking of rising action, what's the rising action? Well, the rising action is a set of conflicts of a story's plot leading up to the climax. So it's pretty much going to be everything in between your opening or your exposition and your climax. It's going to be all the small conflicts leading right up to your climax. Next, we have the climax. What is the climax? Well, the climax is the turning point of the action in the story. The climax represents the point of greatest tension in the work. The climax is the turning point. It's where things start to change for the main character. Generally, you can also kind of connect this to the point of the greatest excitement or of the holding on to our seats. What is going to be the final reveal for this? So the climax generally, though, is going to be referring to the turning point. It's where things change for the main character. Next, we have the falling action, and the falling action is the action following the climax that moves the text towards its denouement or resolution. The falling action is everything that happens after the climax. It's generally going to be where all of our loose ends are going to get tied up, and we start to discover the answers to a lot of the questions that we had as we read. And then lastly, we have our resolution. The resolution is the sorting out or unraveling of the plot at the end of a story. It reveals the final outcome. Generally gives us all of the information. It lets us know what happens as a result of the entire story. The resolution is how things are resolved or finished. Lastly, there's theme. The theme in a story is its underlying message or its big idea. It's what the author wants you to know or to learn by the end of the story. And it's generally a broad idea about life. It's something that's universal. It can be applied to anyone, anywhere in the world, or even the universe. It's going to usually not be stated, and it must be inferred by the reader. The second method of characterization is indirect characterization, and this is actually much more common than direct characterization. In this case, writers develop characters through indirect characterization and stop. I pressed the stop button. Stop. The second method of characterization is indirect characterization, and this is actually much more common than direct characterization. Something about authors and something about something and something and then something else and then something else. And another very important element of setting, not setting, another blah 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 of story is setting, setting story, setting story, setting story, setting story, 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 setting, 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 story, setting, setting, story, setting, 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 blah, 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 blah. That's a song. Wah. Lastly, theme is an important element of plot. The theme in the story is its underlying message. Mash, 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 mash.